Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Rajay Rai, and I work with Macquarie Bank. And I'm here to talk about platforms for execution. We'll talk about how and why we've introduced Openshift. We'll take you on the journey. Before that, what we're going to do is set the stage. We'll take you through the architecture that we have at a very, very high level. And we'll try and explain our use case to you. Hopefully, you can take us on that journey. Now, Macquarie is one of the largest infrastructure asset managers in the world. We operate in about 28 countries. We have 14,000 plus employees. We have 6 large divisions in Macquarie. I work with banking and financial services, and I deal with the division that has the maximum number of client-facing applications. So my remit is applied innovations, as I mentioned, and it's all about making sure that we're using the right people, processes, and technologies in order to bring value to the business. And it's not only about having the right architecture and the diagrams, but what we do is incubate these technologies and ensure that they're cross-pollinated across various parts of the business. Now, I'm just going to try and see if you guys are awake. A quick question. Let me see if you guys can answer this. I need some participation here. So, what is the average lifespan of a human eyelash? Can anybody tell me that? Take a guess. Come on, guys. Don't feel shy. 5? 30 days? Anyone? 3 months? The gentleman there is right. It's around 5 months, right? Approximate. And that's how fast change comes in. So from the time you conceive an idea to the time it actually gets implemented somewhere around the world, think of any idea, right? Takes about 5 months. Think about it. That's the time it takes from the time you conceive, evaluate, adopt, implement, all that stuff. It's 5 months. That's all you have, and that's the pace of change that you have in the world today. So we live in extraordinary times. It's just not normal, right? It's extraordinary. So from an economic standpoint, if you look at what's happening today, the change that we're experiencing, right, the growth that we're experiencing is almost 3,000 times that of the Industrial Revolution. Now just think about it. It's like an asteroid hitting the Earth. It's that big. And you have to think differently about what's happening, right? It's just not normal. So it's not any ordinary disruption that we are witnessing today. So for that, you have to rethink and reimagine the world as we've known it. So, having said that, this change has been driven by a lot of things, right? A lot of reasons. It's due to digitization, of course. There's automation. There's disintermediation. There's augmentation, you name it. Our bodies are wired up. Science fiction is now a science fact. It's a fact now. It's no more fiction. In fact, what's really happening is that, you heard of things like mobile first. I'm sure we've all heard of it, and we've heard it for a couple of years now. But if you, just recently, I think a few weeks ago, it was Sundar Pichai, from the CIO of Google, said, it's no longer mobile first. It's AI first. So it's moving that fast. It's all about machine learning. So if that is what we're going to deal with today, is that's the experience that's going to drive everything, we've got to think about applications differently. So we're always wired up, we're always connected, and we have to think about applications that are always on. It's not about peak performances anymore. It's about consistent performances. From an architectural perspective, I'm an architect primarily. That's my primary job. It's all about thinking of the customer first and outside in in terms of an architectural approach, not inside out. It's a huge difference when you think about outside in. It's all about your APIs. It's about how fast you can move, how fast can you innovate. The faster you innovate, the faster you test and learn, the closer and more intimate you get with your customers. And that's what differentiates us from any of the digital leaders that you have in the world today. So, coming to that, I'm going to have to rush through this. So, vision without execution is hallucination. It's a famous quote by Thomas Edison. We all have a vision, but you have 5 months or less to execute, right? And during that time, you've got to be able to test, learn, handle all your complexities in environments, and push through to production. So that's a pretty hard task. So what's important is the fact that you need a platform, and you need a platform that can help you test and learn and sustain that. So you just can't have a one-off, innovative idea and a burst, and you're done. It's no longer like that. You have to be continuous when you're doing that. It doesn't end, right? So this is how normal enterprise executes. You have a linear kind of progression. You've got an entrenched enterprise that's just kind of watering the garden, trying to make sure that we are changing things at a pace, but your speed and a capability to execute is just linear. And then comes around these disruptors. And this is what that looks like, because they have new technologies. They've had a head start. So the problem here is different. The problem here is it's no longer just linear. It's something like this. It's not a linear kind of an capability anymore. So I'll ask another question again. Let's take a guess. How many times does Amazon make a release to production? Let's take a guess, just quickly. Come on, guys. 5 times a day. 5 times a day. Thousands. That's more like it. They went on record in 2013. I haven't seen any record after that. 11.6 changes a second. 11.6. And Jeff Bezos says that, the organization that, really regards failure a lot is Amazon. Facebook, another guess. How many changes? One last question. I'm not going to ask any more questions for this session. Yep. Any guesses? No, that's a lot. 16,000 changes a month. That's the pace at which they change. So it's, I think, 1 or 2 changes a week. But when I say changes, I mean all the commits that are ready to go, right? So it's about twice a week. And they have Docker technologies, and what they've done is they've got something called Tupperware. Very interesting. Go on to DockerCon, and you'll understand how they make releases to production. So very interesting. So if that's the pace of change, then you've got to think about it, right? If you're an entrant, if you're a new entrant, that's great, but if you are in an entrenched enterprise, you have to rethink everything. So how are we delivering transformation? I'm just going to quickly tell you, come back and revisit the vision that we had. The vision is, of course, for us is to build intuitive and personalized applications. So we have things like natural language search. So you could just, like you're having a conversation, you could say, I love my golf. So you could say, how much do I spend in golf? You can do proximity-based searches. So we're very contextual, right? So it also does things like how much did I spend near Hornsby. I don't know how many of you are from Sydney here, but if you said how much did I spend in Hornsby, it'll show you all the transactions that you made around Hornsby. And a lot of times what happens is you're traveling somewhere, you fill some fuel and you forget that you've actually filled your fuel in that gas station around that place. So that's where it really helps, because we think like that. If you think about Facebook, and you think about all the places you traveled and you see a bank statement, it doesn't mean much to you. But you look at Facebook, it's very contextual. You see, okay, I was in a bridge here, I visited the pier in London or whatever, right? You can correlate that easily. So that's really important. So when you think about platform for execution, you have to think about differentiations, technologies that are going to differentiate you in the market. So in our case, we look at hybrid transactional analytical processing systems, which are systems like Cassandra, Spark, and Solar, which has OLTP and OLAP coming together. So that's the new world, and Forrester call it transanalytic databases. And what I want to focus is on the foundation. So it's all about, we said it's important that you need to be able to execute fast and test and learn. So here is what we think is important. You need to have elastic architecture, like elastic infrastructure. And with that, you need to think about platform as a service. In our case, I like to call that, container as a service. But all these technologies need to be surrounded by the right people, processes, and technologies. So technology is available in abundance out there. But how do you bring it in, and how do you ensure that it can work seamlessly? Without any friction, it can be adopted in the organization. That's really, really important. And above all, you have to think about how do you sustain the experimentation and the learning. You're going to fail. Doesn't matter. You're going to fail a lot. You just have to learn how to experiment and do that fast and look at faster feedbacks. So moving onwards from here, what our architecture looks like is this. So we've got a bimodal IT, we've got ESB that advertises all its services from the products below. We've got a new core banking application. As you all know, we're all moving towards real-time payments. We're consolidating our applications, all our loan applications at the moment. So does anyone know about what's happening in the real-time payments world in Australia? So I think in 2018, you're going to be able to send money to anybody if they're registered, of course, using a mobile number or an email. So there's a lot of changes coming in this ecosystem. And on top of that, we have Smart Data Store, as we call it. We've got a hybrid transactional system, and it's no single point of failure, replicates its peer-to-peer architecture. That's Cassandra. We use Cassandra, we use stream processing, Spark, and we have Solar for full text search. On top of that, we've built our own parsers with which you can do natural language search. Now, above that, you've got your services, an API gateway, and what we are working on is open endpoint independence, which means that it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter whether you're coming from a web consumer or you're a mobile, doesn't matter. The protocols are the same, and it's far more flexible, so you can integrate with various partners, B2B, B2C, etc. Now, on top, we can move faster. We have higher cadence there, and we have a slower cadence below. So we can iterate really, really fast. And because we have this architecture, what we can do is snap our production data, create something like a lab for 30 users, just like Facebook does. So internally, when you go to Facebook, you do latestfacebook.com, you go into an isolated production environment, which is only for its staff, and you can experiment and learn. So we have the capability to deploy to production almost at will. That enables us to go really, really fast. So one thing I must say here is that the challenge for us always been the services that we have above the Smart Data Store. And we'll quickly talk about that. So I have another 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So we started off in 2004 with large applications, and they had to be broken down into services which segregated the presentation layer and the business logic. We did that around 2011. We started doing that. We introduced, we abstracted away the presentation layer. We did that a while ago. After that, in order to go faster and faster, what happened is in 2014, about 18 months ago, when we started undergoing this transformation program, we realized that we couldn't go fast. So we started breaking up those big monolithic applications into smaller pieces. And that's when the trouble started. You want to go fast, right? But then you need to have that ecosystem. So in our case, we've adopted Netflix libraries. How many of you use Netflix libraries for? Yeah, we use it too. But trust me, there are lots of challenges, right? The gentleman here is nodding, because there is. What happens is, these are all open source tools, right? Sometimes they have bugs. And you're jumping up, in the middle of the night trying to fix problems, and it's really not funny. A lot of overheads. So we did that, and we introduced, our own service registries like Eureka. So if you go on to, Netflix open source tools, you'll find all these libraries that are available today. So we use Eureka for service registries. We use Hystrix for circuit breaking, and we use on the Ribbon for client-side load balancing. So you can dynamically set up and deploy these services, and you can make them talk to each other. Now, that got really, really complex. In fact, it started slowing us down. It's not easy to handle this, right? And most importantly, what happened is our architecture had all sorts of different challenges when you moved your applications from test, dev, test, prod, NFTs, or whatever have you, right? So what we decided to do is start looking at technologies outside. So this is a story of this is IdealX, SS IdealX. This is the first container ship. This was, I think, launched in 1956, and this transformed the transportation industry forever. So you had less wastage out there. When it came to transportation, you had ease of moving containers from one port to the other. Didn't matter what goods you had, and then you could have goods for refrigeration separately, shipped out separately. With that, today you have something like 5,000 plus ships moving about 200 million containers a year. So that's the kind of transformation that it brought about. And this is a vivid illustration of what happened in the physical world, where workload innovation put pressure on infrastructure innovation. Right? So this is exactly what we're witnessing now. We're trying to go faster, but you hit a bottleneck. So the answer, of course, is break your monolithic applications down into smaller pieces. Once you do that, then comes the other challenge of managing the ecosystem. And the ecosystem is complex because you want no downtime, right? You need to have isolation, resilience, autonomicity. You need to think about asynchronicity, single responsibility. And what really interests me is exclusive state. Has anyone heard of exclusive state in microservices? So this is one thing that people don't talk a lot about, but exclusive state is important when it comes to microservices. I hear everyone say, we have stateless applications. Where is the state going? At some point, the state has to get somewhere, right? So that is really important to understand, that microservices are not only about stateless applications. So in future, or if you look at any digital leader today, they are working with state, and they have ephemeral databases. Now, having said that, what happens is you've got a complex ecosystem to work with, but when you start dealing with state, you got to think about other patterns. I'm not going to cover that in detail. I'll just leave you with that. If you guys want to go and Google it, you can. But in microservices, what's fundamental today is to think about event processing and stream data processing. That is the future. In fact, I met a couple of guys from Spotify, and this was interesting because all they do is they have, very, very interesting, they don't have a database. They use a log, immutable log. Interesting. I'll leave it at that. And, of course, now you think about containers. So when you start looking at containers, I can give you many stories about what we have, but this is what you need when you start thinking about containers. Now, this is a reference architecture which I've found on the net. And does that look easy to implement? Seriously. I run a lot of meetups. We run a lot of meetups. We have Spark, microservices, Cassandra. And in one of the microservice meetups, there was this leading company that was building it on their own. I'm not going to tell you the name because it's embarrassing. And I was shocked with the complexity that they had to go through. So you've got to start thinking about container images. We are an enterprise, right? So if you think today, what is the multiplier for creativity? Anyone? It's software, right? We all know that. Maybe in future something else will come around, but at the moment it's software. And what's really interesting is, in an enterprise, to get your hands on one of these softwares is really hard. If I want to try Ruby on Rails, if I want to try something, it takes time. It does take a lot of time. So if you go back to Docker and you look at what Docker's principle and vision is, it's all about how do Solomon Hykes this year at DockerCon spoke at the opening and said, how do I get, their vision is to get tools of mass innovation in the hands of any developer in the world. So on the internet out there, you have lots of these softwares, but you have this enterprise layer there preventing you from getting it. So how do you make sure that we can deliver these tools and technologies and software in the hands of developers in a responsible way, right? We're still an enterprise. We need to worry about vulnerabilities out there. I think there's about, it was a report by Forrester that said there's about 60 or 70% vulnerabilities in all the images of Dockers out there. So as an enterprise, you've got to think about a trusted registry. So that's what we get. And there's another story when my guys tried to download Prometheus. It's one of those monitoring apps. It took us weeks. And we got exhausted trying to get through the process, and we said we don't need it anymore. We don't need to try it out. But with Openshift, it's about 5 minutes. You get a trusted registry, you get an image, pull it in, and you're in business. And we overlook the subtleties, which are really, really important in an ecosystem. We think about audits differently. You get something called OpenSCAP, right? When you have to install these containers and run them and manage them, you need to think about vulnerabilities, reporting, audit logs, standards for security. All that comes out of the box when you look at OpenShift. So again, it's something called OpenSCAP. Developer experience is another thing that's really important. You get visibility. So the three V's that Guy Kawasaki talked about in one of his articles, which was velocity, variability, and visibility. So you get visibility. So if you have these microservices floating around, they have these real cool dashboards that show you, which one's running orange, which is running green, and if you have something like 500 of them, we have hundreds when you deploy them. You can actually see what's going on in that ecosystem, which is really hard to do. So developer experience is one thing that you need to build yourself if you pick a platform like that. There are a couple more stories that I have, but one of them that I really like is, you try and get something called Angry Pods. So has anybody got Fabricate or heard of Fabricate? So you get all of this out of the box, you download it, couple of minutes, you go, and you get these guns that you can shoot down containers and test them out. Or has anyone heard of Chaos Monkey? We've implemented that, couple of minutes, you're on. That's it. Because you get an SDN, you don't have to worry about the complexity of one service talking to the other. It's isolated. It's a platform. You can just install it. You have the basic, authorization things in place. You log in. You connect up to your LDAP servers, your Active Directories. All that wiring is done up for you. So it actually lowers the barrier of entry to the market. And that's what's really cool about it. And then when you start deploying clusters across various various zones, what happens is you need to think about replication. So you can maintain some state for administration, right? You have your Docker registries that need to be replicated. You've got some metadata that's required for the cluster to run, for Kubernetes to talk to each other. All that stuff is done for you. And I've talked about the SDN, clustering. There is Ansible, so when you deploy it, what's really exciting is you get that out of the box. If you have REL7, it actually optimizes it. A couple of commands, it optimizes your operating system. If you want to use Atomic, you can go ahead and use it, which is more optimized for containers. But if you're not using that, you just put in REL7, a couple of lines of code, it sets it up for you. So really exciting to get there as fast as we've seen this go. And 3.3, in fact, has other things which are really interesting. For example, you want to bleed traffic. You want 1% of your traffic to bleed to version 2. You can do that. You can set up weightage. If you have, for example, an account service, microservice, which has a read and a write that's separate, you could deploy that in 2 different containers and specify a quality of service for it and get deployed across 2 regions. So there's a lot of complexity when you think about all of this. In fact, because we use distributed technologies underneath as well, we have lots of rules where we use services to load balance, or we have annotations. So let's say you want to use Splunk, for example. You install Splunk somewhere and you want to use it. All that ecosystem is wired up, so just a line of code will give you annotation or a label, and bang, it gets wired up on the platform, because Kubernetes actually takes care of all the complexity that you have. Anyway, that's how complex this is. I wish I could go on and tell you how good Openshift is, but I'm not the marketing man for Openshift. Let me tell you, but it's a great platform. So we selected Openshift, and I talked about some of the experiences that we've had. I'm going to keep 1 or 2 minutes for talking about, taking any questions. I'm not going to go through all of this, but there is a lot of benefits. We've gone from hours to literally minutes to set up a full environment. We have partners, we have APIs, we have partners building applications directly with our APIs. If we have to create a test environment, we flick a button, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, you have your environment. If you want to release just one change, it's so easy, it's just amazing. And that's really allowing us to achieve a lot of speed and agility. Before that, when we used to come in and make a release, we had to first order a dinner. Now we don't have to think about that. So, lastly, I'll just leave you with this quote here. This is from Luke Roblowski. He's the product digital owner of Google. He said, "Dream in years, plan in months, and ship in days." At Macquarie, taking inspiration from our dream, our vision is to dream in months, plan in days, and ship in minutes. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions that I can take? No? No questions? We can have a chat over that over beer. But it's all about culture, like I said, because you need executive help. We have a very transparent business. We work very closely with the business. Business and IT work very closely together. And we started an Agile program a while ago. We made sure that the business and IT are working together. So there's a huge difference. We have one vision, right? And this can only happen when they work together, because business, we need to understand what the business wants. Business needs to understand what the IT has and they can leverage with and from. So we could talk about that over beer as well. So it's all cultural. It's all to do with your executive support that you have. Any other questions? Thank you very much.